Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're taking a moment to make sure everyone is on the same page. I'm opening the briefing meeting for August 13th, 2019 for Lee County School Board. And our topic is going to be our internal auditor. Our presenters will be RSM. And prior to that, ladies, I understand some people are having difficulty finding it. If you go, I'll just send it out again really quickly.
I'll go from our emails.
Yes, and it's 8-4 and it's from me. You should be able to find it. Do you have it up, Debbie?
It looks like this. It's 8-4. If they just
No, if you have it up, you can forward it to everybody.
Oh, I can redo it. Sure.
Okay, do you want to do that?
Okay, I have nothing available
We'll
here.
get it to you, Mary.
No, that's not it. I have no emails.
We'll send it to you again.
Oh, her emails are out.
I have to
Just
start
an
my
email issue.
computer and turn on user account control. Oh, my God.
If anybody has it, just send it to everyone else. And don't you,
And share.
do you have it?
Those wait.
Debbie has it, I'm sorry, Ms. Jordan has it up and she's going to send it to everyone. So we can
Chris, you
have it
have
out.
Sure, Betsy.
Just send it to everybody and that way they can open one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's no worry.
My email,
She needs-
last email I have is June 25th. And
Okay.
something's not.
Ms. Jordan is going to send it to everybody, right?
I have it.
It's done.
Here, Mary, look, you're close enough to me, look.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, Ruth, what do you?
I have no problem sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Has everyone gotten it up?
We can start, Mary and I can share.
Thank you.
All righty, and I did request that we put stuff up there, but we'll sort that out and make sure. So everybody should have report dated July 26, 2019. All right, and I will let our illustrious RSM group introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about each one. Are you on?
We haven't called the meeting to order yet. And Chris is Patrica?
65.
Briefing.
Oh, I'm thinking it's workshop, sorry.
Meeting
apologize.
of, what's today's date? August 13th. How could I forget that? Yesterday was the happiest day on earth. The briefing meeting of August 13th is called to order. The time is 4:04 PM. On the agenda, under D, Executive Services, is Internal Auditor. We have Ms. Murtha and Ms. Ewing listed, but I see somebody who's not a Ms. So could you introduce yourself and we'll get started, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Blondell. I'm a manager with RSM, and I work closely with Jennifer and Clara providing internal audit services to the public sector throughout Florida.
And can you type it in there?
You ready for us? Yeah.
Please.
Thank you for having us. The last time we met, we were down here, and you had approved to have an internal audit function. First step is to do what we refer to as a risk assessment to identify the top 10 auditable areas, so the top 10 risks. I'm going to hand it over to Clara, and she's going to go through. We're not going to go through page by page, but please ask us questions. I can only say that it was such a pleasure meeting with all of you individually and getting, we kind of asked the question, what keeps you up at night? Getting your insight, reading the different articles that we've seen in the paper, your budget, your financial statements, and a meeting with the superintendent and his staff. Everyone was very open, spent a lot of great time with us. It does take a lot of time, and we appreciate how open and forthcoming everybody has been. So thank you for that.
To continue what Jennifer was talking about, yes, thank you. We were able to meet with all of you, down to the superintendent, down to his management team, because every level has a different level of perspective when it comes to risk, comes to process and control. So it's really interesting for us to be able to get that different level of perspective and also kind of see the culture tone at the top, et cetera. So we're able to learn a lot during our meetings while we're out here with everyone. I want to preface the risk assessment. We are considering inherent risks without controls. So with what is on your top 10 does not mean that we think something is wrong with it. It's just inherently risky in the environment that you live in. You're not alone with a lot of these. Whether you're a school district, a county, or a city, you're not alone with a lot of these. So again, I just wanted to preface it. We're not saying that something is wrong. It's just inherently risky.
One of the things that we noticed during our assessment was the lack of a whistleblower and code of ethics policy. So you note on page 2 that we make a recommendation for the board to have that, to put that in place along with the superintendent and his staff. It should function independently. There's a lot of services out there. There's that keep it within a third party, keep it anonymous, keep it outside of both staff and the board, utilizing the attorney to look at that reporting. Florida statutes, code of ethics would be your guide. Also, have it be well communicated. We do a lot of work up at University of Florida, and we notice every time that we go, they have posters with phone numbers. And really, that's all it takes, is to open that up. We do a lot of work with school districts. We find that that's very helpful for the culture. A code of ethics and whistleblower policies in place can help deter and report things that need to be reported. If it goes through the attorney, collaboration with the board and with us, some things do not require an investigation, some things do. It could lead to change of culture, or ultimately it could lead to fraud, waste, and abuse that's identified. So we did make that recommendation on page 2, but if you'd like to turn to page 6, we'll jump right into the top 10.
All right, so the first area that we have here is facility construction. And as Clara and Jennifer both mentioned before, it's really, this is a high risk, no matter who you are. Obviously for the district, it's in any district that we work with, construction is typically an area of some of the highest spend. Obviously there's contracts that are often in the tens of millions, close to $100 million, per project. And so it's an area that we find is just inherently risky. And so that's why, part of the reason why we've included it here. We also noted that there were some findings in the prior, Attorney General report. And of course I've read through those. And so what this audit would, as proposed, would focus on would really be understanding, the construction management team here at the district, how they're involved in the procurement process, how they're involved in the contracting process as far as they're involved, alongside with procurement. And then how are they managing the contracts? So if, depending on the type of contract it is, there's any number of variables that can impact how it should be managed, in the most effective way. And so it'd be looking at how are they looking at invoices, how are they analyzing change orders, what other vendors are they using, in terms of assistance with the district if there are any. And so it's really looking at the process and the control there and the major control points to where the district is reviewing things that are coming from the contractor, in an effort to make sure that the district is expending the funds in a manner most acceptable and in accordance with the policies here.
Excellent.
Are there any questions or comments? Please.
I have one, basically it's to the attorney. I know you had mentioned before that you were working with Mr. Williams and et cetera to revise our contracts to kind of eliminate some of the risk with the contracts. Can you give us an update on where we're at with that?
Yes, actually, Mr. Williams and we have been processing proposed agreements. He has distributed it through procurement, and procurement has provided us with some of their comments and input as well. And so that conversation is continuing, and we're working on that steadily.
Do you have a definitive date as to when we might have it?
The answer to that?
No feet to the fire. I'm just asking.
I mean, Because we're looking at the basic contracts right now. We have construction contracts. There's many different types of contracts that exist. So as we started looking at just the general contracts, we started to expand into the construction and other detailed contract documents, and that's kind of created some conversation amongst us as to what would be the next steps. And until we get that completed, once we know generally what the indemnification language should be, what the Florida law requirements should be for public records, for example, and other items like that, it's really already part of what are your contract documents, but it's not in any typical consistent form. And that's what we're trying to create. So we need to have that conversation. So within 30 to 45 days, we should be well into completed documents, in my expectation.
And if the board chooses to go with this first one, you could, work with them. It's a question, not a statement.
It's actually a good time for us to be talking about contract documents and others while we're having this discussion in a broad base right at the moment with staff and within our firm.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
There's a lot of horizontal work in a school district, and since I'm unfamiliar with the various strategies, let's say we went with facility construction as a first thing, would there be at the same time perhaps pulling in financial department, especially procurement, and so it wouldn't be, some of these would be actually looking at several different divisions at once. Is that true?
That's very true. It's an excellent point. So very rarely do we only go into one department. Processes and functions overlap, and that's part of what we do, bringing everybody together and collaborating and looking at what are you doing, what's happening over here. Certainly working with the attorney, looking at contracts, looking with procurement and finance.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ms. Morgan, did you have your hand up?
No.
Anyone else?
Okay.
I'm wondering whether you took the Evergreen Solutions performance audit into account when you came up with these findings?
So it was reviewed as part of it, but again, this is just, as we see it, it's an inherently high-risk area.
And that, I probably should have stopped you at the beginning. I would assume construction is high risk for any growing school district. So how is this specific to Lee County? And like going through the report, I didn't see a lot of specific to Lee County except for a couple of audit findings that have already been resolved. So I'm reading through it and I'm thinking, okay, how is this a Lee County issue as opposed to just this is inherently risky in every organization? You know what I mean?
I think, excellent point, but I think that, certainly for all the school districts that we audit and every public sector entity, this is absolutely one of the top 10. It might not be the first one, could be number 5, number 6, but we find every school district manages the process different. I mean, in some cases, the contracting is different. The level of risk the school district is willing to take is different. Do they have different factors in? And Matthew can talk more specifically, but looking at the process, a point was mentioned, the collaboration between the 2 departments, the 3 departments, the 4 departments, and how that works. The risks are consistent, but the process and how each school district manages that function, do they have things in-house? Do they outsource different things? Do they look at the invoices, or do they rely on the third party to do that for them? Do they look at subcontractor invoices? So absolutely, in every audit plan that we have put together, internal audit plan, you will see, especially spending the millions and millions of dollars that you have in your 10-year plan. But how we audit that is customized to what and how you manage that here.
So this is, when I think I spoke with Claire, and thank you for taking my call. I believe that when we were speaking, though, we were talking about how this is just like a summary of what we're looking at, and then we would go in and then decide and bring it, as you just said, bring it to the local level.
Right, yeah.
So it's just a general of what you believe are the 10 most important things.
That is correct, because part of our audit methodologies in the beginning, we're going to have a kickoff with the stakeholders to really appropriately scope this, the right objectives. What is the end result? What are we trying to see from this audit? How, the varying aspects, whether it's facilities, whether it's timekeeping that we spoke about. Again, it will be customized during that planning stage so we can make it right for Lee County schools.
Clarify, because you mentioned viewing prior audits, and Mrs. Patrica mentioned that. What we decide on is basically ground zero, that you're starting from scratch, and it doesn't matter what a prior audit said, pro or con.
Correct.
That might be just a guidepost or a jumping off part, right?
So an internal audit focuses on processes and controls. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll go through and identify the risks. Then we identify the controls to mitigate those risks or make sure that those risks don't happen, right? So that's where we spend a lot of our time. Once those controls are identified, we test them to see that they're working. So we have a lot of conversation with the owners of that process to understand how they go about mitigating risks, what risks. So we say what could go wrong and what has gone wrong, right? We want to know what your past is, but certainly it's a forward-looking, looking at processes and controls to make what's good great and to make what needs help, identify those gaps, we call them control gaps, and brainstorm with those owners of controls that can be put in place to mitigate those risks.
Okay, moving on.
All right, page 7. Number 2 is purchasing and procurement compliance. This kind of relates to some of our previous discussions that we were having with facilities construction as well, because we do try to take this one from the inception of, okay, we need to procure a good or service through the contract execution. So to reiterate that point, it is perfect timing for something like this as well, because what we do see is, procurement is a very fast way to get any organization into the paper. There are so many different realms that you can use. There's, with Florida statute, there's so many guidelines that you have to follow and make sure that you're in compliance with. Sole source can be high risk. Riders can be high risk, but they can also be beneficial to jurisdictions if they're done correctly. So we had a lot of great conversation with your procurement manager, his experience, where he's been. So with purchasing and procurement, again, it's just making sure, going in, looking at those processes, looking at those controls, and making sure that the school district is protected with the proper controls and they are operating as intended.
Questions or comments? Moving on, please.
Number 3 has to do with human resources, recruitment, and onboarding. There's over 11,000 employees here at the school district. The HR takes on a lot of functions, a lot of responsibilities, and recruiting and onboarding is inherently high risk for the school districts. It can come to how long does it take to fill a position? Are the positions being filled with the right background, right set of experience, et cetera, and just making sure that the background checks, et cetera, again, all of those are going into play. Again, we will customize this. Every school district does it a little bit differently. So looking at the way that Lee County Schools is doing it.
This becomes more and more important with the teacher shortage that we see around our state and different very innovative ways that different school districts are recruiting, going out to different schools and the different fairs and things that we're doing, that everyone's doing. So the risk certainly has increased. However, hiring the right people for the right job is always something that is a good idea to take a look at.
Questions, comments? Okay, for number 4, I've spoken with the board attorney, and it's important for us to have a discussion about this in executive session because it involves safety and security. And Attorney Gabriel, can you address the issue of the electronic?
Yes, ma'am. To the context of what the conversation has been in so broad, general conversation, I'm not necessarily concerned to that context. But however, if we start getting into more details, of course, anything that might relate to informational technology and security, actual security of what the Lee County schools might do, that would cause some concern, and that would be, of course, those are exceptions from the sunshine regulations. You are allowed to have that conversation in a shade meeting and not within an open meeting like this to protect those particular areas of concern. So to the conversation that we've been having so far, I'm not necessarily worried that there be a broad conversation, but just wanted to have that warning and understand the recognition.
And what about the sharing of that item number 4 outside the district at this point?
Well, the documentation that we have right now is still broad in its context, but when we start getting into details, that will be protected information that should be protected for that very reason we're talking about, security and other things that may impact or potentially allow someone to have information that would be to the detriment of the school district.
That's contrary to the advice that I received from your partner. I'm sorry, but I was told that this should not be placed out in the universe electronically and that it shouldn't be
Oh, you're talking
shared.
about the document by itself right at the moment?
I'm talking about item 4 in this report. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, the conversation, well, we haven't talked about the document. The reason
Right, no, that's what I was prompting you about, the sharing of the document.
The document itself it contains some items with regard to item 4 that may be redacted or protected in that regard because it has some issues to it, which is why you didn't get it. It's not on your board docs. It's not published as of now. We will have to be concerned about that, and that's the conversation that we've been having. But we will protect it and look at that as we come forward. To the conversation today, it's only item 4 that addresses. That can just be redacted, and then you could deal with it that way.
So my brother is an internal auditor. Should I feel free to share this document with him as it has come to me, or should I
Ma'am,
not do that?
all of these items should be kept within the confines of the board and not shared with the public or any member of the public. It should be kept in a secure fashion until we move forward and address it that way.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
The question I would have for RSM is, if this item were chosen to be one of the audits, and you went into IT and you found something that was a risk, walk us through how that looks. Where does that go from the time you discover it? Where does it go? Who has it? How is it handled?
As the attorney mentioned, we're very familiar with Florida sunshine standards and confidentiality. Those are some of the only reports that we can issue confidentially in closed session. We typically follow what the Auditor General does and the protocol of the Auditor General, and we actually issue that to the superintendent and have a closed session with the board, either one-on-one if you prefer, or under the guidance of the attorney at a closed session.
Ms. Juvenile?
So this document wasn't given to us in closed session, so is this information, so I'm getting confused, is this information not public record?
The section, item 4, has particular specifics to it that might be security related, have some concerns, which is why the conversation came up. And to item 4, those items should be protected.
Okay.
Ms. Fisher, did you have a question?
No.
Sure. Ms. Moore?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding something. So this was sent to us as an email, and an email is public record.
Right, that's
So this is all out there.
Well, no, because not everything in a public record is.
Accepted from public records
Okay.
because of the nature of security, and
Okay.
it's specifically exempted.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Thank you.
Any other questions on item 4? Okay, moving on.
All right, so the 5th item is maintenance operations, vendor management, and monitoring. Understanding that the district does have quite a few of its maintenance operations in-house, there are although there are a lot of functions that are in-house, there are some that use third-party vendors. And so this would focus on the maintenance department's involvement, as much as it is in the procurement of those third-party contracts, as far as maybe writing the scopes or writing the RFPs or the invitations to bid, if they are to help with the procurement department with that, and following through to vendor monitoring and management. And so how are they monitoring their vendors? And that would of course include their review of vendor invoices, any kind of performance evaluations that the maintenance department would do on their vendors, of course, how it's being monitored when contracts that are coming to a close would be rebid, and so forth. And so really it's just focusing on the controls around the vendor monitoring and management, specifically as it relates to contracts owned by the maintenance department.
Questions, comments? Moving on, please.
So the next item on page 9 is the half-cent sales surtax. So obviously understanding that this is a relatively new item for the district, it's something that we provide audit services to, internal audit services to several of our other school district clients. And it's really around review and testing of the data that comes from the school district to the school board. And so testing that information that you're receiving from management to make sure that it is accurate and that you are expending the funds as you promised, in the referendum as was voted on by the voters.
All right, number 7 is timekeeping. As previously mentioned, you have over 11,000 employees within the school district. There are varying forms of pay types. It's a very decentralized process. Again, this is not out of the norm. So with the decentralization and the varying pay types, there's manual aspects with the process. We heard when we're having discussions that some departments may be doing things a little bit differently as well. There's FLSA compliance and requirements. So again, this is inherently high risk from all of these factors that are related with timekeeping. We had a lot of great discussion with your payroll manager and just talking about how can we utilize the system to automate things more that will mitigate your risk, add some more value within the process, and help keep the district protected when it comes to those funds.
Okay, moving on.
Page 10, legal services. We heard there's been, a lot of change, even with your attorneys, who we met someone different prior turnover. Again, this is kind of just looking at from a risk mitigation perspective, how is risk being mitigated? You have your board attorney, you have your staff attorney, just seeing the inner workings and with that, with risk mitigation and with making sure that the district has continual coverage.
The next item is purchasing cards, P cards as we typically call them. And again, just a very risky area in general, but understanding that, as we provide employees with the access to make purchases, outside of the typical procurement fashion, there's just a risk there. Several of our other clients have had, issues, and I know there've been some that have even, had some investigations that weren't painting their districts in a great light as far as that goes. And so because those kinds of things are what's going to hit the paper in a second. And so we've included that in here to really, around the monitoring that is over the purchasing card process, issuing the purchasing cards, reviewing the transactions, and then the controls associated with that.
Okay.
And lastly on the list, White Fleet. So this has to do with the fleet that maybe employees use to go to conferences, et cetera, throughout the county itself. We heard a lot of discussion about just the varying variables that may be utilized with White Fleet. When should we buy? When should we do maintenance? When should there be reimbursements? So we've done this with a few other school districts as well, kind of looking at that process and seeing where that break even is and seeing where those variables are. And so for Lee, we can look at that, see what the other school districts are doing, and see how we can help improve from that process perspective.
Do we have any idea, like, how much money we're talking about here with White Fleet? What percentage of our budget? Like, how much risk are we looking at?
We didn't, there's not a lot of detail available because we dug, Matt and I were digging even more when it came to trying to get to a dollar value from that perspective, but the current budget and financials don't go that deep.
One of the things that we're finding is a change in strategy when it comes to fleet. Instead of owning cars and maintaining those cars, utilizing rental cars, reimbursing for mileage. You know, there's some safety issues. You have a lot of people out on the roads, and you guys are growing. You're a big district now, so maybe looking at and assessing the philosophy that once worked that maybe doesn't work anymore.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So would y'all be making like recommendations to do that versus how we presently do it? I mean, would that be something that's the end result from you? Okay.
Absolutely.
So-
We'd look at it from a return on investment, so to speak. And certainly it wouldn't be, you should stop doing that tomorrow, but maybe there would be an implementation plan of how that would look over 5 years.
To show us like what our savings would be.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay.
We love to come forward and provide you guys with savings. That's one of the best things we can do.
So that's kind of like earning your paycheck. So.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So then, and I guess, wouldn't that also best practices, so you know what others are already doing? I mean, you kind of already know that information, I think.
Well, and it depends. There's some cultural situations that, you know, we have some districts who will not take their cars away from their folks, even though it's not cost beneficial. That's, you know, you get to a certain position, you get a car, this is how we've always done it. So that can be a little challenging. That's why I say sometimes it's a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, sometimes it's a 5-year plan where you roll out some of these old processes and start evaluating new.
Honestly, I mean, I believe in like leading by example. And actually, our superintendent, that was one of the things he opted in his contract. He took a monetary instead of having a car, and so he chose not to even have that. Like he took that out of his contract. So I
Me too. I don't want a car. I want the mileage reimbursement, or I want to rent a car if I'm going someplace. So giving that option is putting the dollars around it to understand. We don't want to change it just to change it. Maybe it's working very effectively, but it's certainly a strategy that we've seen, not only our public sector, but, you know, large corporations, which you guys are, what, $1.5 billion entity, to look at in different light.
All right, so I'm wondering, go ahead.
And I don't know if I should ask this to you or to Dr. Atkins. Honestly, I do not know what our policy is as far as people that are entitled to have cars assigned to them that are, you know, their own, or somebody needs a car for travel out of the district or out of the county. What is defined as, yes, you need this car, or keeping cars overnight? Do we have one central place where we have policy or something, a plan written out?
I'm not aware of a specific plan, but I can tell you what our standard operating procedure is as it relates to the white fleet. Typically, we maintain a white fleet which is utilized really 2 ways. One is we have a set of vehicles that people can use and take, like, let's say for trips out of town, or even trips in town. You know, like, for example, I'll utilize I don't have a quote vehicle.
Right.
The vehicle that you see out, you know, in the fenced-in areas, one that's available to anyone, and I try to encourage people like Mr. Edie to take it on a regular basis so that it does get utilized. But that's one that can be checked out by anybody to utilize if they're making trips within, because it's more cost effective for us to use a white fleet vehicle than to pay the mileage piece. So if somebody's leaving, you know, out of town, like I think Brian Williams has used that particular vehicle. So that's one type that we maintain. The second would be for an individual that would have it as a daily vehicle, and that would be somebody that like a lot of people a lot of our folks in maintenance, as an example, if you're a group leader and you might be called out at night, or you leave from your home and work, you report directly to a school versus, coming in and picking up your stuff and going out there. Those people have vehicles. Very similar to that would be the white fleet and transportation. So if you have transportation supervisors, people that work for Mr. Lloyd, including Mr. Lloyd, they have vehicles that they use on a daily basis to go out and monitor our fleet, check on accidents and things such as that. So again, two types. One, it's for the employee that isn't used every day, and it's used by a whole wide variety of employees. And then the second is somebody who needs one on a daily basis. The last thing I would say, and this is something that if we do an audit of this, that might be beneficial. I feel that, and I've said this multiple times, and our crew has been looking at the utilization of our white fleet. You need to look at the purchase of vehicles. How much does a particular vehicle get used? Are we using it effectively and efficiently? Do we have to maintain a fleet that is as large as ours currently is? We have worked to get rid of a lot of our older vehicles, because when I first came into this position, we had a whole bunch of them out around this particular building, and we've slowly been able to get rid of some of them, but I still think there's plenty of work to do.
So I have a corollary to that. So currently, those individuals who either check out vehicles overnight or for a trip, or have vehicles that are assigned to them because, for instance, what came to my mind is when I traveled around to view the various juvenile justice center. That's an individual that director needs to constantly, and I know Mr. Eady goes to other locations as well. But what do we have currently, and this might be something for you guys, to monitor that once you have this vehicle, you're not, oh, hey, on the way to Sarasota, I'm going to stop in Venice to visit Aunt Sally for a while, or, what do we have to monitor that these vehicles are being used solely for business purposes, and that when they're being used, people aren't taking side trips and misusing them?
One of the things that we do on our vehicles, we maintain GPS on the majority of those vehicles, and one of the things, like, for example, I've asked the maintenance department to do is to put in a process where they have to, in fact, one of the functions of Barbara Cedino is what she will do is go in and you can pull a work order, and you can look at where the work order is, then you can pull the GPS track to make sure that they've done that, because when I was in the reason I feel the way I do about that particular process and why it's important is because when I was in human resources, we did catch some individuals that through GPS that were using their vehicle inappropriately. You're supposed to be down in Bonita, and yet the GPS is showing you in North Fort Myers, oh, by the way, it's your house. So what's that about? So if I felt then there needs to be a standard way for them to monitor that. So that's what we do in the maintenance department and also in transportation. Probably a lesser extent where we could do, and I'd be interested if there were best practices here, is for a checkout process, because I'm not aware of any. If we check a vehicle out, somebody says, I'm taking a training in Sarasota, we're going to assume they go to Sarasota and come back. And if there was a question, you can pull the GPS record, but I don't think there's anybody going back and monitoring whether or not they went to that training in Sarasota and indeed went the most direct route and didn't go off on a side trip to visit their aunt in Venice. So.
And if I could, what Dr. Atkins was talking about, that's a perfect example of what we do look at. We're looking at those processes. We're looking at those key controls that they have in place. Are they operating the way they're supposed to operate. And that can be applied to all of these audit areas that we spoke about. Looking at your policy procedures, are the key controls the right key controls? Do you have any design gaps? Are they operating the way that you want them to operate? What are other best practices that we can help bring to add value to the process? You know, we were able to meet with you all, was it May, June? I can't remember now. And I believe one of the things that we spoke to you about is we're auditors. It's the nature of the beast sometimes for what we do, but our perspective is, in our methodology, the high point of our methodology is where can we add value? We get to bring to Lee County Schools what we've seen elsewhere and be able to help Lee County Schools be even better than they are right now.
Just another little thing, we do have a board policy on driving and replacing district vehicles, but something that probably our audit team could take a look at if we need to do some revision of that policy, because it does talk about expectations relative to what a district employee is supposed to do when they're driving a district-owned, leased, or rented vehicle. So in terms of how they can use that vehicle, you know, only strictly for approved district business, operate in accordance of all applicable laws. So those of you that have a heavy foot need to pay attention to that one, you know, et cetera. So
Stop
the
looking
point is
at
we
me.
do have policy around that.
Ms. Gittens, did I see your hand up?
No, I was just telling him, stop looking at me when he says that. As I breeze past him. I have, so as we're looking at all 10 of these, is our, in my mind, our goal would be to select where we start and to, my understanding is that the way you've put them down is the highest risk, most cost potential first, is that correct?
And we had a lot of conversation about this, and we could have all, you know, argued amongst us, and we could have great conversation. I mean, there are 10 high-risk areas. We put number 1, 2, and 3 certainly in a specific order, particularly, as you mentioned, looking at construction, looking at purchasing will give us a really good glimpse into the district's other operations. We will see more than just that one thing. If we started with White Fleet, we would probably just see White Fleet. So that's an individual audit as opposed to more of an entity-wide look at the district. And I think after we did one of those, this could change, right? Because this is as of we assessed it over the past couple months, but as we watch your board meetings and as Tallahassee straightens some things out, et cetera, this could change.
And if, I mean, my thought on this is that the first one is very timely with the contracts being worked on at this point and with us in the midst of construction projects. If we could save anything anywhere, that would be good.
We would agree.
What do you need from us in terms of decision-making? Do you want a top 3, a top 5, an ordering of the top 10, with the understanding that it very likely will change after day 1? What is it that you want from us as a board?
We would like marching orders of what you'd like us to look at first,
Okay.
and direction and approval.
Okay, so that's not really a plan, that's just one item. So you just want, we're not really coming up with an audit plan here, we're just giving you one item. That's all you want?
Either way, top 3 would be great. We could,
Okay.
but we would like to start, there's a concept called Audit Fatigue. We've been part of it. It's not fun. So we would,
Americans, is your staff familiar with audit fatigue?
Very much so, yes.
Okay, so I'm a little bit concerned about time. It is 4:45, and we have some other items that we need to discuss during this briefing in advance of tonight's meeting. And I feel like this board needs to have a robust conversation about this, more in a workshop setting, perhaps with a facilitator. So I'd like to ask the, I don't know, I guess get consensus from the board that we prioritize this as a workshop topic at some time in the near future so that we can really flesh this out. So I don't know that we'll, given this board, I don't know that we can come to a decision on top 3 items in an hour and 15 minutes. Is there
You have a
any?
statement, and then I do.
Ms. Morgan?
No, I don't see the need for a workshop. I think we just go with what they've presented, and let's just see where everybody is with respect to the presentation they've given us.
So decide on the top 3 as presented? Okay.
That was my comment as well. There was, I forget where it was, something about the hotline, was that with the whistleblower piece?
I was going to ask about
That's
that.
separate.
Recommendation on page 2.
Oh, that's a separate recommendation.
That wouldn't, well, that was going to be my
That's not the
question.
audit.
That wouldn't fall under HR at all? A little bit, maybe,
A little bit, sure.
maybe?
But that's not an audit, that's a recommendation that we're suggesting the board put in place along with their attorney in collaboration with starting an internal audit function to be able to appropriately handle whistleblower accusations and have a code of ethics so that appropriate levels of investigation can take place in an appropriate manner.
Can I suggest then that we come to consensus on at least maybe the first 2 items that they have shown, and the whistleblower piece to look further into that as well? So it would be 3 items that,
Yeah, but she's
have anything
saying
to do
no,
with the
she's already gave the
whistleblowers.
recommendation.
Yeah,
that
that's
it's-
not them.
they've already shot the ball, it's in our court now with the whistleblower. That's our court.
Okay.
So,
Well-
and I was just gonna say, let's take the first top 5 and let's go with it, and so I was a little bit more, but, so that was just my
I'm
opinion.
kind of with 3, but whatever.
I'm not comfortable with 5. First of all, second of all, I think we need to just direct the board attorney to come up with an ethics policy, is that what you said?
Code of ethics?
Code of ethics and,
Whistleblower.
Whistleblower, context of discrimination, what? yeah.
and pursue options for us in terms of an outside agency that could handle that function for us.
And they can do that too. That's part of what they do, correct?
No, they're just sharing that.
We can look at the results with the attorney and to determine if, we would recommend an investigation. But those phone calls, emails, will all go into a third party, and they're anonymous. And then a report could go to your attorney, and then he would share that with us, and we would collaborate to see, what needs just direct action and if an investigation would need to happen.
That's one.
Yeah, my thought on this, the idea with the whistleblower, et cetera, is you already said that you've been in a lot of districts that you see the posters and all. Perhaps between you guys and our board attorney, you could do a little research and come up with several districts in Florida where this is
We're happy.
happening and working well, and that we could see, in the idea of best practices. Is that a possibility? Right, instead of reinventing the wheel, to see if we could start out just by seeing District A, B, and C,
Absolutely.
that it's working well and they've had positive results, and, we could start from there.
Yeah, because, I mean, some, Palm Beach has their own inspector general, but that's only one of, most districts don't have that department. So, do they? I mean, I don't,
You're correct.
right, so I thought it was a little unique there, so.
So that seems a little bit different from what I suggested. Can you restate that in terms of something we can seek consensus on?
Yes, that we seek consensus on having the board attorney and the auditors to come up with a short list of districts in Florida where they have this kind of an ethics policy and hotline, or, the things that you mentioned in your recommendation. And then instead of starting from scratch, when we do talk about this, that we have a basis for discussion.
Comments?
Can we put a time?
Resistance? I don't know that we can put a time on it. I don't know that we're in a position to determine how long it will take. Can you give us a realistic expectation in terms of time?
So let me just kind of rephrase what I think I heard you say. What I believe that you're asking the attorneys, the school board attorneys, as well, working with RSM, is to collectively look at different school districts and determine where we might make suggestions to the board that these are whistleblower process and procedures that seem to be working well, and that should be recommended for your consideration.
At least
So that will take.
Yes, and
Policy.
Well, and then with your review and approval, RSM and my office would sit down and create something that would be for your purposes, for this,
So then, instead of going to a workshop and, I think it should be this, that, and the other, we start out with a foundation and we know what is working elsewhere. And, I'm not saying that we adopt it wholesalely from any one district, but, at least it gives us a basis. And that's what I'm suggesting, just a little.
Absolutely. And so I'll start already, and I would just say, RSM, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please contact us, and we will, and provide us what you would believe to be, with your expertise, what you believe are the best districts that exist, and we will take a run through, and that can be very quick, honestly.
Can we see consensus? Thumbs up, thumbs down, can live with it? You've got 7 thumbs up, Ms. Reader.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And then I heard 5, but I've heard more 3s.
I go 3.
Do we have consensus to,
I think 3, because 3 is going to take them a long time. It's not 1 month for each one.
but I want to clarify, you're going to do one first and then come back.
Correct.
Right.
So can we seek consensus on the top 3 items listed in the report, with one coming back after it's completed? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yes.
Can live with it. Great. You got 7 thumbs up. Ms. Reader?
Historical 2 sounds.
And do you have any closing comments? Does anybody on the board have any closing comments?
I have a question regarding the recommendation about the Code of Ethics and whistleblower policy. How unique is it that we don't have that? I mean, do most districts have?
No, not, I would say most large districts are moving in that direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
If I could just comment to that point, I mean, most of our government clients, where we provide labor services, we make sure that they have those provisions within their handbooks, labor handbooks, whatever it might be. So,
Okay.
I mean, we have a familiarity with that, but, looking for school districts in particular is where I can use RSM's help and their expertise.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
So would it work, would it be appropriate to also include 1 or 2 of the clients you're familiar with in a business setting, how they use it, or it wouldn't be?
What they produce first,
Okay,
because
okay. Got it.
school districts are unique by themselves.
Yeah, I understand.
Great, I think we're good. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Before you read the policy, is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on the agenda items for today's meeting? Pause, make sure. Seeing none, we will move on to board member comments. But can I ask the board if we could possibly reorder this and put good of the order first? Because I know that Ms. Gittens had an item for good of the order for discussion regarding the legislative meeting that I think is time sensitive. So if we
I
could.
was going to bring it tonight.
Tonight.
Yeah, that's not something that we would vote on, that's just something that we would talk about. So I think it would be more,
Okay?
is that,
If you're saying we do it now, that is fine. I don't have my things in here, I'll just pull it out.
is the board okay with moving L up?
Yeah, as long as we're given permission to make our board member comments tonight, if we don't have the opportunity to make them this
People have been
afternoon.
doing that anyways.
I know that, but I'm just, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so do we have board consensus to move L up to the next item on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
As soon as I find what I sent out. Give me just a second. Can't find it.
Is that what she's talking about?
I think so.
If anyone has it up, can you just shoot it to me?
Is this what you're looking for?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so in a conversation with Ms. Green concerning the logistics and timing and all of that for our legislative meeting that she's working on, I had sent out previously a suggestion of, which included visiting 3 different schools and taking the bus, and you all have that information. In talking to her about the timing and availability of legislators, I sent you this afternoon a revision of that, and I just wanted to make the statement first off that overall, I think our goal would be to show the legislators not only the, excuse me, the positive things and the good things that we have done, but my own personal opinion is if we are saying we need more funding, we need more whatever, then we should show that need as well. And the revision of the process is to have the legislators and in any one of the board members that chooses to do so, and it's a choice, can meet at Lehigh Senior in the morning as students are coming in. They would have an opportunity to talk with students, and which is what a lot of the legislators continue to say. They want to talk with students. They want to hear what they have to say. So having them there with the option of having breakfast if they want, or just standing around and walking around and talking to students. It gives them a broader aspect of what students are thinking. And then after that, Harns Marsh Middle is one of our more challenged schools with space and demographics of students, and yet they recently were one of the few schools that went from a C to a B. And considering their plethora of level 1s and 2s and disadvantaged students, as did East coming out of the status, I think that that's a really admirable thing to show. And having the legislators see the constraints that they have within the building, and still they achieved raising their grade up to a B. They are 10 minutes from Lehigh Senior, and in the process of going over there on a bus, they would also have students riding with us on the bus, so that in the trip they can be talking with students again about their school and what they're doing, and stay at Harns Marsh for 20, 30 minutes, and then return to Lehigh Senior, and then use their new ROTC building to have our discussion about legislative agenda, et cetera. And in that meeting would be the legislators, the board members, and also the students as well. So it's, students are infused throughout the whole time. The fact that we start at Lehigh Senior, their cars are there, so everybody, comes and leaves from that location. Option B was the legislators arrive at Lehigh Senior, and we go directly into a Q&A. And they would have a tour just of Lehigh Senior. I personally, and this is just Gwen speaking, I personally think, like I mentioned before, we have to show a need if we ask for giving us something. We can't show that we're, driving a Cadillac and we want another car. If we show the Cadillac and we show the banged up old car, they get the understanding that we still have needs. Yes, we have done a wonderful job with what we have and what we've been given, and look at what we have done and where we're at, but our hand is still out for a need. This is what we need from you. So that's what I'm putting forward. So, done.
Great, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go around and provide each board member 2 rounds of comments, so to speak. without being repetitive, I won't say the same thing twice, but give everybody an opportunity to speak, give your opinion, and then respond or have that discussion. And I'll start with you, Ms. Fisher. Do you have any comments or?
Well, I wholeheartedly support having the students actively engaged, because I think that was the one piece that was sorely missing at our last meeting with the legislators. I think it would really depend on the legislators themselves and how much time they have to commit to this, whether or not we can do the traveling. I also agree that we do need to show a need, and I think that there may be other ways also that we can do that and include that in our meeting presentation, at that time. So I guess my question in my mind is, how much time will they commit? How many of them will actually be committing to coming? Because I think that we need to provide the whole picture, but I want to make sure we have the audience. Yeah, which, I was a little bit disappointed the last time out. And I understand that their assistants and aides come in their place, but I don't think it has the same impact. So, that's my thought.
And I agree with what Ms. Fisher just said. I love the idea that Ms. Gittens initially had suggested, the whole traveling with the bus. So I think it's important to have the attendance, so that's going to be key. I think that we need to seek that out first and then determine what we're able to do as, with them. So I agree with everything they just said. I'm excited to see how it actually what happens and how the outcome is. So,
Ms. Gittens?
Actually, when I spoke to Ms. Green and I asked how much time we had allotted for the first one, and it was 2 hours. So this can be done in 2 hours. And also the kind of pivotal piece is if someone doesn't want to go to, the travel portion, then they could be there for the last portion in the discussion. And I understand that having the actual legislator is optimal. However, I have seen in the past too that when they do send a representative, if we can wow them and turn their head as to what we're doing and what we need, and get them excited about Lee County and what we're doing, they will pass that on as well. And I'm not sure that a presentation or slides of what our schools are like at Bell Change, and you've got a school that was built for 1,100 and it's got 1,600. You don't get that feel if you're not standing in the hallway somewhere watching that actually happen. That is what gets dollars to say we need more funding. So.
Ms. Jordan?
I agree with it too at the end. I do believe that we need to make sure that we get as many legislators there that we possibly can get. And I think it is more difficult for them to be moving about. And I would not want to say, well, you can come halfway or, while the other ones are going somewhere else, and then we'll meet you back here. I just think that we need to keep them all together. Having students there definitely is a necessity, because the kids just are empowering on their own, just speaking to them. But I don't even know if I would take them to Lehigh Senior High, because we just built something new there. So thinking about that, I would look at
That was not on there.
Lehigh Senior High?
No, it's just two. It's just Lehigh Senior and,
Yeah, Lehigh Senior.
okay, Lehigh Senior and Harns Marsh. I
Maybe
thought you meant
East Lehigh would be one versus a building that's brand new that we just put money into, showing them something that we haven't put, and the need there. So, I mean, there's many different schools that we could actually choose, but we're really on their schedule. I mean, you got a lot of different schools. The elementary schools, I mean, we have tons of schools that we could decide on that have a great need. And I just think that we're really at the mercy of their schedule. So we need to get that first.
Dr. Atkins, you're doing that, I want to make a comment thing.
Go ahead.
Well, the comment was, if you think about your platform and what do you specifically want to show them that is supportive of your platform, and where would be the best place to see that? You know, one of the things that we did just pass the referendum, so, you know, it's not so much showing a capital need, but there are certainly other needs. I mean, I think that you have, you know, the whole compensation piece, well, a lot of things on your platform. I mean, where can you get your biggest bang for your buck there? And not saying that you can't do it with the sites that you've posed, but, you know, I think you need to think about a little bit of strategy going into this, what you want them to see, and how does that relate directly to the legislative platform of the board.
Ms. Vaughn? I'm sorry, were you done?
No, I'm good, yeah.
Ms. Vaughn?
First of all, I do agree with, we need student engagement, show the need, and it would be nice to have the actual reps there. May I suggest a logistical change and still keeping with the two venues? If Harns Marsh is only 10 minutes from Lehigh Senior, and you're talking about eating breakfast with Lehigh Senior, there's a big gap in time, because doesn't middle school start at like 9:30? And I know from 8 years of getting up very early that the kids in high school are eating breakfast at like 20 till 7. They're getting there way early. So I would suggest instead that it start at a more, for people like me, reasonable hour at Harns Marsh, which starts later. You know, we can decide on the breakfast piece or not, but that they're there as the kids maybe come off the buses and see them scurrying to get to their classes and all of that, and then move for the main part of the agenda to the meeting. And something else I know that was pointed out in an email today, and that I was wondering about, is this is something that we have to have open to the public. So as we talk about this, you know, I don't know about the first part where people are just, you know, mingling with students and viewing, but certainly wherever we decide to have this, we're going to need to have a setup so that the public can also.
Like we did last time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all good and well to eat with the kids, but for 38 years, I didn't eat that cafeteria food, and I'm sorry, I'll mingle, I'll be there, but I'm not about to eat French toast sticks and chocolate milk.
It was not mandatory.
I know, I'm just making a joke, trying to lighten it up. I know, it's optional.
French toast.
French toast sticks, isn't that one thing they get?
Sticks.
There's fruit now.
Fresh fruit.
Yes, Ms.
Corn
Bourgeois.
dog.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing that just popped into my mind that might backfire on us. I've heard many stories of kids getting the breakfast, eating the one thing that they like, and tossing a lot of food.
That's a federal program.
Which is a good point, though.
But it's a federal program.
Federal.
Well, what do you mean it's a federal, what does that have to do with
They
anything?
have to give them certain things. It's mandatory that they take that.
What we give them.
But
Any change would have to come
do
from
you
the Fed.
think, I'm not talking about changes, do you think that's going to make a good impression when they're watching kids dump most of their tray in the trash, or?
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, and anyway, those are my
It's no
comments.
breakfast. We took the breakfast off.
Ms. Williams?
Okay, so I want to return back to what Dr. Atkins said. But first of all, I really think it's unrealistic to ask people to do 2 sites. As I'm listening to people, though, I'm thinking maybe back to what Dr. Atkins said. I think we have one initiative that we really need to talk about that is in addition to what they have done at the past 2 years, and that's mental health. So we can do that in any school, and I think it's really important that wherever we do it, that either the principal and staff or families, some people get an opportunity to talk about what the impact of prior legislation has been and what the opportunities would be that come with the proposal that Ms. Fisher has put forward. So I'm looking for a mental health piece. I'm also thinking that maybe we ought to do it at the middle school. At a middle school, we did a high school last time. I don't think it has to be breakfast, but, you know, I don't know how you would do it with kids, but there's got to be some way this school can figure it out. And I love the idea of doing Harns Marsh Middle, because of the fact that they've been so successful, and because of the fact that they've had federal as well as state injection into that school that has helped them turn it around. So anyway, those are my comments.
And Harns Marsh, just so you know, and this might play into it a little bit, but you know, last time I was out there, when I took a tour, 76% of the teachers, according to the administrative team, were actually career changers. So you're on the certification issue, you're on recruiting and attracting and the challenges that go with it. I'm sure that Linda Mayer could certainly speak to all that. I also am sure that she could help you with the mental health issue as well. So, just a thought.
So my comments are that I don't want to direct the superintendent or staff to do anything specific here. I don't want to direct our lobbyist, Ms. Green, to do anything specific here. I feel like they're the experts, and we're not. We sort of set the vision, and they put the meat on the bones, if that makes sense. And I think Ms. Green has a much better feel for what our legislative delegation will participate in and what they won't participate in. This is only the second year that we've done this, and I don't want to lose sight of the importance of those relationships with the assistants. You know, they're kind of like the gatekeepers. We have good relationships with them. I'm not disappointed when they show up. I think I might have been a couple years ago, but I'm not necessarily disappointed when they show up now, because they're the gatekeepers. If I think it was Ms. Giovanelli that said if they're excited by it, then our representatives are going to be excited by it as well. So I just don't feel like we as a board have the expertise to fill in the details. I feel like the superintendent, staff, and Ms. Green all have a good feel for what we hope to accomplish, and we have to rely on their expertise to bring this together. So at this point, I'd like to go through, if there's a second set of comments that are different from your first set, let's go through before we seek consensus. Ms. Fisher, do you have anything to add, different or
No, but I think a middle school might be the way to go at this point for various reasons. The timing, the difference in the setting, and I think middle school kids are amazing reporters. So, yes. I know the ones on our student advisory over the years have been extremely articulate and very thought-provoking.
Ms. Giovanelli, I'm sorry, the word squirrely is going through my head, because I have 3 of them in my house. I know. So the word squirrely is what's going through my head. Ms. Giovanelli.
Okay, so I love the middle school idea as well. I just, and I understand the Harns Marsh and everything too, but I also was thinking, we went to a brand-new school, why not go to an old school that we're needing so much work? And I know we have the tax referendum and that's in place, but what best to show that we had a need and look at it, you know, and really see it. I think I'm all about the experience. So part of me wants to say, you know, we have these schools that are really old, like really old. So, I mean, that was my only little bit of thought, is that something brand new and now something really old, to show what we keep trying to maintenance and putting the Band-Aids on and so forth. That's all. And I'm not going to select which school, even though I have a couple in mind, but I'm not going to even do that because that's not what's important. So, but I like exactly what Dr. Atkins said about staying on task with the what and yes, and sticking with, there's a reason for the legislative platform. So I really don't want to deviate from that. That's most important, I think, because that's what the end game is. So that's it for me.
Ms. Gittens?
First of all, Ms. Vaughn, we do not have to eat. Second of all, when I spoke with Ms. Green, and there is a legislative piece that they cannot accept food, accept water, whatever. So I said, well, how did we do Bonita? They paid. for lunch. They were charged for that. And I wasn't aware of that, so that's why I'm saying in case everyone else wants to know. Bless you. It's not necessary to have the food piece for so many reasons, and I think Ms. Morgan brought up the last time we discussed it about going to Lehigh. There are so many asks and needs out there. We fit so many of the criteria of our legislative agenda, the mental health and all of that. To have the opportunity to show a school that has taken the funds that they have and are succeeding and moving up. And that school has gone from, I believe, at one point it was an F, and then a D, and then a C for a while, and now it's a B. I mean,
Marshmallow, yes.
yes. And then as far as which school, when I was talking to Ms. Green about it today, she was, fine with whichever school we chose to do. As far as old and new, I think also the concern is the overcrowding and the growth that's out in the East Zone and out in Lehigh. So there are so many factors that would be showcased that fit with our agenda, doing it at Hardins Marsh. So that would be my vote.
Ms. Jordan?
I'm for an older school as well, maybe Fort Myers Middle School, I'm just saying. And they're full to capacity, and it is definitely, they need help out there. But again, I would go to both of them, Ms. Green or Dr. Atkins, to choose, and I'd be okay with that.
Ms. Vaughn?
I like what Dr. Atkins said. I didn't realize that such a high percentage of the faculty at Hardins Marsh were career changers. And we've talked about having students involved, but I think it's important to have a couple teachers involved too, especially these career changers who can clue in, since that's part of our legislative agenda. I like, if we are to do just one school, to do, and I have not been to Hardins Marsh, but we did South Zone, to do an East Zone school, because Hardins Marsh is kind of a microcosm of what's happening in Lehigh, in that it is so overcrowded, and of course that's why we're building a new high school and have a junior or a middle school on the books. And thirdly, although we don't get in there and work out the minutia and the logistics and the invitations, I don't think it's at all inappropriate for the school board to weigh in and discuss with staff what we feel is important. And I think we're doing that, and I think it has been beneficial to all of us, and I think it's also beneficial to the staff. If we're going to work as a team, we need to have a very definitive input into what we would like to see. And I think we've verbalized that we want to show conditions that are not pristine the way they are at Bonita Springs High School. And those are my comments.
Ms. Morgan?
So piggybacking off what Member Vaughn has said, we have weighed in. The staff and the superintendent have had an opportunity to hear our opinion. I believe we should seek consensus to delegate the site and the agenda to the superintendent and the lobbyist.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, can live with it? We've got 6 up and 1 live with. Thank you. Went into sleep mode. Okay, next item on the agenda. Dr. Atkins, would you like us to take this time to answer questions about I-7 tonight, or should we move on to board member comments?
We're fine to take those questions. I did try to make sure that we had the right people in the audience, so I do see we've got Kathy, Scott, and Amy and Susan, and anybody else who we might need to try to answer those questions about the contract, yes.
So I'll ask the board's pleasure. Is that okay with you? And the reason why I'm asking it is because in a briefing, I feel it's less formal, and I can have more of a back and forth with staff, like, although Mr. Rickenbacker will answer my questions in a very verbose manner, he still might leave something unanswered, and I feel like I can go back and forth with him in a briefing, whereas I don't feel it's appropriate to do that in an action meeting. So with the board's permission, can we start to discuss this and leave reports to tonight? Can I see thumbs up, live with it? Sure. Thumbs down, what do we need to do to get you on board?
Like I said, I was prepared to do it at 6. I didn't even bring my things out here for that discussion at this point. So if that's what you want to do, I'll just bring it up in my comments at the end if I have to do it that way.
Great. Okay, so what seemed to be the burning question? I know 2 people were going to pull. So why don't I start with you, Ms. Vaughn, if that's okay? What are the...
Okay.
And by the way, your questions are going to be very enlightening to me as well, because I have significant questions about this that I really want answered going into tonight's vote. So I'm glad that you're pulling it.
Thank you. Yeah, after seeing this afternoon's additional talking points, I still have unanswered questions about management fee and general conditions that equal $11.5 million. And one of the questions that I had was, why is this, in the talking points, it mentioned a lot of different areas, and it mentioned percentages. Why is this all lumped together when apparently there are several different things that go into this one item? And I'm wondering, why is it all lumped together? And what I'm curious to see is, because I think we got a different percentage. I didn't go back and listen to the workshop, but I thought we heard something like, oh, the typical construction management fee now is 7%. But I think this afternoon's talking points said something like 4%.
4%, yes.
Okay, but I think we heard a different, I didn't go back to verify it, but I think we had a different percent that was given to us at the workshop, and we didn't get specifics. It's management fees and general conditions. Can we have a list out of how much of that 11.5 million, is it 4%, is it 7%, is it 16.5%? How much of it is for the construction management, and what other specifics are in there that weren't in there and their dollar amount when we did LLL?
Can I ask a question about your question before they respond? So was it the July 29th workshop with Mr. Rickenbacker? Oh, so it was the agenda review one?
He was,
Okay.
yeah, it's that. It was, he was ill, and my questions were not able to be answered at that point. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
And I have a few questions, too.
We'll get there. Dr. Atkins, you want to?
Yeah, so we'll just, I think the teams heard your questions. They can respond as they see appropriate. So whoever wants to go first.
Well, it's up to you. I don't follow the script, so if you want the real McCoy, I'm going to give you the real McCoy. I don't need her both. Guaranteed.
You know I'm teasing. I wasn't criticizing.
Start off with, we're talking 2 different contracts.
Yeah, Scott, if you could scoot up to the mic.
Let's start off with, you have 2 different contracts between the contract that was with LLL and MMN. LLL was an all-inclusive contract, and what that means is the construction management fee and the general conditions were embedded in one 7% number. We cannot audit the general conditions. We do not see them. We don't know what makes them up, other than the standard industry items building a school that they would use: dumpsters, brooms, cleaning, scissor lifts, and employees' pay, big portion of that. Unauditable. The difference with our new contract is we reached out and we've gained Osceola, Pinellas County, I believe Brevard, Orange County. Many of the contracts were provided by the auditor who has audited all of our large capital projects. We had the legal team create a melded document that is an industry standard with other school districts throughout the county, or throughout the state rather. The standard average fee is 4% for a construction manager at this time. Now, we're just speaking fee. That is the cost of their firm to manage and oversee the volume of work.
I don't mean to interrupt, but in the interest of time, all that I was interested in is we've got a line with a big lump figure.
Okay.
So it's 4%, so how much of that? It's 4% of the total amount.
Yeah.
I could figure it if I were a math whiz, but I'm not.
Every one of you have received as backup in tonight's action meeting, this is your GMP book. This front file sheet, which is a compilation of all the information inside of the GMP, will give you an exact idea what it is. You'll see a construction cost, a physical cost of men and materials to go to school, $69.7 million. You'll see all of these items listed down below, general conditions, $4 million, $4.6 million. That's the 4%. Okay?
So,
The first line you see is general conditions, $4 million, $4.6 million. That's general
Right.
conditions.
Right.
In Chapter 6 of this book, it spells out all of the items in the general conditions that are applied. The big bulk portion of general conditions is the physical, project managers, and superintendent fees over the course of a 20-month project. So when you look at that sheet in tab number 6, the general conditions are spelled out. I'll give you a sampling of some of the big ones. Reprographics, project staffing, BIM software, job site trailer, project manager, scheduler, superintendent, assistant superintendent, safety managers, job site radios, tools, on-site vehicle, gator cart, something of that nature, temporary facilities and controls. That's your project trailer, your electric bill, your water bill, and all the things associated with having an on-site office trailer. That comes to $4.6 million. That's your general conditions. Those are the items that we would never see in the LL contract and be able to audit. So now your question is, at the end of the job, they have to prove that they spent this money with invoicing and audit validation. If it's unspent, it comes back as a credit to the district, just like contingency. Unused contingency is brought back as a credit. So getting back to the front fly sheet, keep it simple. Yes, you do. It should be the backup. The girls scream at me because it's so voluminous, they don't want to attach it.
it's in the backup, okay, because I was looking at what we got
I will tell
initially.
you what the difference is, and I think I can explain where some of the confusion may have been. The original question was, what is the fee for LLL? Well, the fee was 7%. And they said, what's the fee for MMM? I added up all of the things equally to the LLL project. Remember, LLL was fee and general conditions. I added up all those items that are shown on the bottom of the front fly sheet, so it was apples to apples, and you are correct. It came out to the $11.5 million. So if you look at that fly sheet, you'll see the items that are incurred in that 11.5 figure. General conditions, 4%, which equals $4.6 million. The insurance program, $1 million. Now, the insurance program is spelled out in the contract as to what that qualifier percentage allowed for them to pay for insurance is. And that figure right now is $1 million. Warranty, $0. They have to do that because that's what they're supposed to do. The builder's risk policy, $757,000. That's based on a project, and it can vary. The duration of the project carries us through 2 hurricane seasons. He's buying an entire builder's risk policy at the beginning of the project, which he's allowed to do. At Bonita, it was a little different. Bonita had 7 amendments because we didn't have all the design documents done. So the builder's risk policy was brought at stages throughout the course of the amendment, and it's cheaper that way. You're basically getting builder's risk on, say, $20 million instead of $80 million.
If I could add just a little bit of higher level information, Mrs. Vaughn. You had specifically indicated you wanted to know the difference between the management fee and the general conditions. So in the information that was presented previously, they were bundled into one line. So if we were to break that one line out into 2 lines, you would have management fee 4% for Suffolk, for MMM. And then the general conditions, the wonderful thing is that very long list that Scott's provided you in your backup material, that's all the other general conditions components. As we compare that to a different contract format that is not decomposed the same manner and is therefore not auditable, so we have changed our process so that now we see every little itty bitty detail and have greater insight into it. So the one thing I would say that might have been a little confusing is we put in one line, management fee and general conditions. If we had unbundled them, it might have been a little bit less confusing.
And that's why I wanted that particular item explained last Thursday, and so now I'm kind of scurrying to look at it. Let me ask one other thing. There's a 2% contingency, right? Did I read that?
I'll explain it to you. In the GMP, you have a 2% shared owner and construction management contingency. That's inside the GMP. In my total project cost sheet, you'll see an owner's contingency, which is 3%. That is our money. It has nothing to do with the contractor. So in the event, now we put that in there, and that's always been what we've done in previous, except Benita, we were so tight on money, we pulled that out. That is meant if you decide you want to have a special program. Let me give you a perfect example. We've designed a school to have an 8-classroom addition on the outside if it ever needs to attach to the building. If we find the numbers are exploding in Lehigh, which they are, and midway through this project with the construction manager, we need to pull the trigger on that and do an amendment, that $3 million would be used for that. The portables, if I come up short, I have 1.5 in there for portables. If I need to bring a brand new electric service into that school, which could be as much as $200,000, $300,000, we're surveying that school now that we got everybody in, that would be where I would pull from the owner's contingency to cut a purchase order to perform that work. Any of that money, typically the 3%, we've always given back to the district. And in many cases, Amy and her division have used that as seed money for other projects in the district that maybe didn't have the funding that we wanted to get going.
Great. Is that exhaust? I'm gonna go down here.
Go ahead.
Ms. Juvenile?
So I have a question. So what was the cost of the land for Gateway? I don't see that in this at all. And in the Bonita, we had the 11 million was built into that 87 or 85 million, whatever it was. That was built into that. So I don't see that here or in any of the documents.
Neither GMP for LLL or for MMM has land cost in it. Your total project cost for LLL sheet has the cost of the land, which is about 11 million for Bonita. I can't tell you what Gateway, they bought it, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. We could certainly look that up for you.
Yeah, because that's on top of the 98 million. Wouldn't that be?
No.
One.
Already owned it.
Two separate issues. When I come to you with a total project cost, I have to report everything that was involved in that project. So if there was land involved to purchase, I have to report that. If there's FF&E, I have to report that. If there's permitting, I have to report that. My job is to give you the maximum expense that I'm coming to you that I need to build that facility.
And the questions that were being asked about the construction of the school. So that's where we delved into providing information about the details of all the individual components that make up the construction part.
I think I understand what Ms. Giovanelli is asking, though, if I can say it in a different way.
Okay.
So our overall cost will include the cost of that land from 10 years ago?
No.
Although it's not something that we have to approve today.
No,
To build that school, we did have to
because
purchase
it's
land 10 years ago,
I
no?
have
Is that what you're asking?
I have no land costs in your total project cost to build this school because it's not a fund line I need.
I understand
Now, and I want
what I'm
Amy to
saying.
jump up if I'm speaking incorrectly. When we did Bonita, we were going for the COPS funding. In order to get the maximum repayment of all items, we recouped the cost of the land, which was bought before you even got the total project cost, but we can wrap that into the COPS funding and have COPS support that. That's why the $11 million is in the $84 million total project cost you had for Bonita.
I didn't restate it well. Go ahead.
I think I know what you're saying, though.
Okay, you try.
Okay. What she's saying, at the end of the day, the cost, I mean, this is already purchased, it's done, okay? We have the land as our land. But at the end of the day, the total cost would be the construction of what it is and what the land is, and if you put that together, that would have been the total cost of the entire building.
The term that we are using
At the
for
end of
total
the day.
cost is what we need to finance.
Right.
What we are,
Exactly.
the initiative for this project, so with the land being on the books already, It's not included in the investment to bring the project to completion.
Because it's
So
already
we're
ours.
asking them to change their professional definition of the term total cost.
Okay,
in a
and
way that doesn't.
And I understand that, but we have said this is a $98 million school, when in fact it's really more than that, because we bought that land. So that was an expense that was paid for at some point in time. So I can't just overlook the fact that that's not, should be an amount that's included, because with Bonita, that was just because we financed it doesn't mean that, and that becomes the total cost. That was what it cost to build that school. I think that's really important for the community to understand the difference in the two.
Somebody's owned it land.
I understand it's already owned land.
Dr. Atkins first and then Ms. Fisher.
I understand what the board is asking for. There is a difference in terms of what we need to have done in terms of board action versus what, if you, as a board member, would like to report in what you put out there as well, Bonita's costing us $98 million now is the total project cost that we have to approve using land that was purchased in 2004 for X amount of dollars, that's fine. It's just that when this team comes forward to report in terms of what it needs board approval for, the total project cost is what we're asking for your approval. And so for the documents that are relative to what we're trying to do, we have to report it as the $98 million figure. Now, again, we can try to research and find, I'm sure we could find the purchase cost of that particular piece of property and be more than happy to provide that to board members for your information.
I could even make a customized total project cost sheet with the same information I have and add a line at the bottom of the Excel sheet for if it's $5 million for the property, bringing it up to $102 million, whatever.
I think it's important to know. I think it's important for the community to know that.
We can do that.
You know, I have a big problem with the construction fee, management fee of 16.5%. I still don't understand that, because I believe that
Where are you referencing?
we're taking all the risk and the builder's taking none. That's basically what I read
Not at
in
all.
that
Where
16.5%.
are you finding 16% fee? Right in the bottom of the sheet, it's 4%, it's $3.123 million. That's in your GMP, that's in the backup. So I'm not sure where you're getting a 16% fee from.
$11 million, that's,
$11 million in the fee.
That's not the
$11
fee.
million is a combination of all insurance, general conditions, and the fee.
right. But, okay, so builder's risk insurance policy is usually on the builder, not the district.
Not true, it's based on the contract terms, and right now the contract terms state that is a billable outside of the fee.
The contract terms with Suffolk, is that what you're saying?
The district's approved contract terms allow for the bond and the insurance to be outside of the construction manager's fee. Now, you are correct, on LLL, the bond was included in his all-inclusive fee. The contracts have changed. We are in line with other district contracts so that it can be entirely auditable, all of the general conditions. So right now, let's say we have a number in here that actually comes in lower. Anything that is not spent outside of the fee is auditable. And if it isn't invoiced and auditable, you get that back as a district.
Exactly.
And one thing that was pointed out to us by Suffolk is that because we were able to go forward all at one time, remember that one of the things we want to do to provide the board with an accurate total project cost or a construction cost is put the design to a construction manager, let that construction manager go out to subcontractors and get the best deal that they possibly could get. So Suffolk has been able to go out and get those deals, and actually has been able to deliver this school to this board at a lower cost in terms of, if you adjust it for inflation, a lower cost than what you're getting for LLL, because they were much more efficient with the subcontractors. Subcontractors, because they phase it over time, and the way that the nature of that project was set up, those subcontractor costs on each particular little mini project were more than what you would see here with this particular project that we're doing here, MMM. And then the other piece is you get a little bit with the scale. So if you're doing a larger facility, then your per student station cost is usually a little bit lower because you're more efficient in the build.
That's correct. And let me give you a quick analogy, very simplistic. Inside an all-inclusive fee, you would have dumpsters. Let's assume 100 dumpsters are going to be required to handle the refuse on your project. In an all-inclusive fee, you don't get any unused costs. So if you only use 80 dumpsters out of 100, you don't get that back. And here in the general conditions, if it states a value of 100 dumpsters and they only use 80, that's an auditable term that gets credited as a credit change order back to the district. That follows everything that is listed in that general conditions line, everything. So the fee is 4%. That is what this construction manager is getting to manage a $81.2 million construction job.
I'd like to give Ms. Fisher an opportunity to speak, but with the warning that we have 5 minutes before we need to end to go into tonight.
No, actually, I think Mr. Rickenbacker has adequately explained it, but the original cost of the property has nothing to do with this board or any money that we're approving now, that we have to answer to the public for. It was purchased many years ago.
I understand.
At another time by another board. It's like if I bought a property 20 years ago and I'm going to build a house on it now, it's paid for. It's part of the district's resources, is that property that we already own and have already been accountable to the public for.
And I don't want to scare you. This is not meant as a scare tactic or anything of that nature. Typically, a GMP, when it's created by the construction managers and given to us, usually has a warranty of the value for 30 to 45 days. If we miss this, and we've already been hearing it, it's coming, and it's coming big. It's all of the tariffs because of everything that's going on with China.
True.
If we have to go back out and redo this GMP because the subcontractors want added value, this cost could go up.
What's the deadline?
I can understand your concerns. To be honest, when I started with this project, I had the same questions. It's very difficult to compare LLL to MMM because of the way the contracts were written. So to me, the best way that I've been able to understand it is looking at your total construction costs. And once you look at the total construction costs, you see that they're very similar. And as Dr. Atkins said, when you make it for a cost of inflation and the size of the project, in fact, MMM is more expensive, or LLL is more expensive than MMM. And the way that Suffolk described it to us, who has now entered the room, is if you think about it as a balloon. If you hit the balloon on one side, it's going to inflate on the other side. If you hit on the balloon on one side, the other side, it's going to inflate on the other side. Because of the way these two contracts were developed, you can't see all of the costs and where the increases of the costs in LLL are because they're hidden. There isn't a way, and we tried for 3 full days. We sat ourselves in a conference room with Suffolk trying to figure out how to compare these in a way that would provide it apples to apples. Because the contract, the way they are written, because you can't see certain costs in the LLL contract, you just can't. So to me, the best way to compare it was to compare the final numbers. And when you see the final numbers and you see the comparison and you see the for lack of a better word, the equitability between the two of them, it makes you feel more comfortable that, in fact, these contracts are equitable. Moving forward, we won't do contracts the way we did at LLL anymore. In fact, at one point, we compared this to the expansion project at Lehigh Senior and saw that, in fact, those numbers were analogous to what we saw with MMM. Again, because we could see all the numbers, we could delve into the contract. So I think it's easier to see it that way.
Ms. Patrica, can I please have time to speak?
It's going to be pulled, is it going to be pulled tonight, or is anybody?
It got
I
pulled
guess
already.
I will pull it tonight then, because I didn't get an opportunity.
If we could just hold on, and can I ask the board, is it going to be pulled tonight?
I put in a request to pull it.
It's already been pulled, I thought.
I requested it be pulled. I don't know if it
Okay,
did.
then we have to finish the discussion tonight because we are at 5:44, so without any objection,
Let's go.
meeting adjourned. And we'll have the action meeting tonight at 6. Where's?
All right.